Good morning, Rio Grande third graders. It's so good to see you here today. It's October 29th and it's Thursday. We had a snow day, so we are running a little bit behind in our DMA for this week, but we are going to catch up because tomorrow we're going to do Friday for day 4. So let's take a look at our solutions for today. First problem has to do with looking at a pattern. And we need to find the missing numbers that are in that pattern. So I hope you have a sharpened pencil this morning, and let's get started. So if we look at the first number of the pattern, we notice that it is 145. The next number is 148. And the following number after that is 151. So what we need to do is, first of all, we're looking at how the numbers are either increasing or decreasing. Now, if we look at the pattern, we know that each number is going up as we follow the pattern, which means that we're either adding or multiplying. Now, if we were to multiply 145 times 2, even 2, we're saying 145 twice. We're not going to get to 148 by multiplying 145 2 times. So we probably are going to say this is an addition pattern. So how do we get from 145 to 148? Well, if we look at a number chart and we see that 145 is right here in our number chart, and to get to 148 we have to go 1, 2, 3. So we could say that to get from 145 to 148, you need to add 3. So let's see if the same thing happens when we add 3 from 148 to 151. Well, let's double check. So we're at 148, 1, 2, and if we go all the way to 151, that's 3. So yes, that happens to be how the pattern is going to follow. So we need to add 3 more here to this 1 to get the next number in our pattern. So 1 added to 3 is going to be 154. So that's the next number that goes in the pattern. So I'm going to place that here. I'm going to add another 3 onto 154. 155, 156, 157. We're adding 3 more here to that 1's place. So we're at 157. If I add another 3 here to that 7, you know your automatic tens, which you should. 5 plus 5, 6 plus 4, 7 plus 3 is going to give us a new 10, which tells us that we're going to add another 10 to the 50. Now we're at 160. And this pattern could continue going on and on and on. If we were to add 3 to 160, we would know that this would be 163, and so on. Let's take a look at our next group of problems. Our next set of problems asks us to fill in the blanks. So we're looking at a comparison of 2 numbers, 315 and 415, and we want to know if 315 is less than, greater than, or equal to 415. Now remember, when you're reading an equation, read it from left to right, okay? Or when you're reading a comparison, read it from left to right. So when we say 15 is blank, then 415, then we could say 315, looking at our hundreds place, we know that 300 is less than 400. We don't even need to look at the 1s or 10s place here because we know that just because we're at the higher place value and we look at that place value, we know 300 is less than 400. So we can use a less than symbol. 100, well, those are the same. We have 10, those are the same. and 6 ones. Those are the same. So we know that this is equal to that amount. And our last one, we have our greatest place value is 600, and they're both 600. So we know that those are equal to each other. However, when we get to the tens place, when we say 640 and 690, 640 is going to be less than 690. Now, we don't have to look at the ones place since we know that our tens are not the same. So we just use our tens to help us decide. Now we're going to take a look at our subtraction equation. We want to find the difference between 521 and 294. So that is our difference. I'm going to put a D there for difference. Now, if we use the break apart strategy, we can start with our hundreds and subtract. 500 minus 200 is 300. We have 20 minus 90. Now, can I subtract 90 from only 20? If I have two tens, then that tells me I cannot subtract 9 tens from only 2. So what I need to do is I need to regroup or borrow 100 so that I can subtract. That's going to leave me, if I regroup, 200. Now when I subtract 100, now 120 minus 90. Now I can subtract. So when I want to make this easy on myself, I want to find how much does it take to get from 120 to 90, or I could count up by tens from 90 up to 120. So if I do that, what comes after 90 by tens? Right, 100, and then another 10 would be 110, so that's 2 tens, and another 10 would be 120. So I have a difference of 30, or 3 tens here. 3 tens is 30. Now, I've subtracted my tens, now I can subtract my ones. And you'll notice I have 4 here that I'm subtracting from only this one. Can't be done. So I can regroup, or I can a 10, or I could actually just borrow 3 from here and make this 27. It's up to you, but usually if we're going to use our understanding of the algorithm, we borrow a whole 10, leaving this 20, and we regroup that 10 here to make this 10 and 1 is 11. Now we subtract. We need to know, well, 4 plus 4 is 8, so this can't be 4. 5 plus 4 would be 9. 6 plus 4, we know our tens, right? 6 plus 4 is 10, so that's not equal to 11. So it must be 7. So now if I put this all back together, I have 200 in my hundreds place, a 20 in my tens, and a 7 in my ones, and I have 227. Now, the same thing is going to hold true if we use our standard algorithm and line up the place values based on what they're worth. So, we know that we can't subtract 4 from 1. Why? Because if I only have 1 apple and I try to subtract 4, it's not possible. So I regroup, or I borrow a 10, and I'm left with 110. Not 1, but 110. So here's that 11 that we were just talking about a minute ago. And now I'm going to regroup that 10 as 11 here. So now I'm going to subtract the 11 minus 4. If you want to count backwards, you could from 11. Or if you know your addition facts, you could add blank plus 4 equals 11. Well, up here, we already have shown what 11 minus 4 is. And we know it's 7. We have 110. Well, if you look here, we had 2 tens, but we had to borrow 1 from here. So that's where that one went. we are going to borrow 100, leaving us with 400s. We're going to regroup that as 11 tens. Now, 11 tens minus 9 tens is 2 tens. And that's what we had here when we subtracted. And now we have 400s minus 200s, and we get 200s. So again, these need to match. If they do not match, then we need to go back and look for some maybe misunderstanding or where we made our error. Double check by using subtraction or addition. We can always check our subtraction using addition. So we take the part we found and we add it back to the part that we subtracted to find our total. This is our total. We're subtracting part from the total to find the missing part that is unknown. So now that we know it, we know 7 plus 4 is 11, which is right here. We regroup that 10 to the tens place. That 90 plus another 10 is 100. So we've automatically, right now, just created a new 100 based on 90 and 10 more. We have 2 for 20. Now we add 20 plus 20 is 40. 200 plus 200 is 400 plus 100 is 500. 521. That's exactly what we started with as our whole. If your whole does not match what you started with, then as you're checking this, it's not going to be a correct difference here. So let's go on to our word problem for today. Tyler drove 500 miles last week. So we know the total miles that he drove in the week. So what do we know? We know he drove 500 miles last week. On Monday, he drove 146 miles. That's part of his trip. Excuse me. On Tuesday, he drove 200 miles. That's another part of his trip. So far we know two parts of his trip out of this 500 total miles. How many miles did Tyler drive the rest of the week? So if we were to think about how this is being broken up, we know his total trip is 500 miles. That's the total. On Monday, I'm going to put an M for Monday. He drove 200 miles. That's part of his trip. On Tuesday, he drove, 146. My mistake. Thank you. Because I needed to correct that. 146 miles on Monday, 200 miles on Tuesday. We are missing the rest of the week, whatever that might be. Okay, so R for rest of the week, RW. Let's put an RW in there. All right, so we know our total. We know two of our parts. We're looking for the missing part. So that tells us if we're looking for a missing part, we're subtracting because we already know the total. We can do one of two things. We can take the 500 miles and subtract each part separately, or we could take the two parts that we know, add them together, and then subtract it from the total. But let me show you how we're going to set this up. So this is day 3. So we're going to take our 500 miles, and from that we are subtracting the 147 miles for Monday, and we're also subtracting the 200 miles from Tuesday to get what's the rest of the week. The missing part of our trip. Okay? So, remember I said that you could do one of two things. You could add these together and then subtract, or subtract parts away from the total. So I want to subtract parts away from the total because for me, it's easier for me to say 500 minus 200. I'm going to subtract that very easily from 500, which is going to leave me with 300. So far I've subtracted Tuesday, and I label that because I want to remember what it stands for. Now I need to subtract Monday's part. So if I take what's remaining of the trip and subtract 147, then I could take my 300 minus my 100, which is going to give me 200. I could subtract 40 from 200, which is going to give me 160, and then I subtract 7, which should leave me with 153. Now, that I can place in my missing part of my equation. Now, I could also, like I said, I could add these together, and it's very simple to add these together real quickly. So if I were to take 200 plus one more 100, that would give me 300. And I'm not adding any 1s or 10s to this 40 or 70, so that leaves me adding those to my 1s and my 10s place. So I have 347. Now I take the 500 and subtract the 347. So 500 minus 300 is 200. Now I don't have any 10s or any 1s to subtract. So what does that tell me? I'm regrouping and I'm borrowing 100 to subtract these 40. And if I subtract 100 minus 40, we should know our hundreds. 60 plus 40 is 100. Move that up. Now I have 60. I could take that 60 and subtract 7. I could just easily move that over here and subtract 7. Or if we stick with our understanding of regrouping, we take the 50 and we take 10 and subtract 7, which would be 3. Now, if I were to say take 60 and subtract 7, it would be 53. And that's what we have right there. So when I put this back together in standard form, I have 153, which is exactly what we had from our previous strategy. So 153. If these did not match, we would know that somewhere there was an error in our subtracting. We're going to continue to practice subtracting. I know that regrouping is kind of tricky whenever we're in third grade because we tend to forget that we have to regroup in order to subtract. Adding is much different because we can combine numbers in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't matter what order we put them in, but in subtraction, it makes a difference. So we know that we cannot switch numbers around in subtraction, and we have to borrow when we do not have enough to subtract. So hope everything is going well in the land of subtraction here. And if we continue practicing, you're going to improve every day. And have a great afternoon, and bye, third graders.